understand. Cool. Sharing my screen now. We have other very important things to discuss. So just give me a thumbs up because this is the kind of validation I require to start another session on another topic. All of us understand framing, right? And we have no questions. I mean, you must have pondered upon what it is, the first timers. So no questions, even in like hindsight, right, about the session. Cool. Okay, thanks for that. Now today, another important topic should be what are the types of arguments that are mostly there in any debate round, and how do you go about them? How do you determine which argument to use in which motion and which argument has better weightage uh, compared to the others?
Excuse me, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I'm kind of having trouble hearing you. So can I just switch off my video and see if
Yeah. I mean, whoever is facing internet issues and has like a legitimate concern, you're free to not be on
thank
camera,
you. Thank you.
but don't just arbitrarily be laid back about the session. Yeah, cool. Okay. Um, the types of arguments then, the most simple and like like an easily comprehend. I mean, let me put it the other way around, right? It's not about which argument type is simple. It's about which type of argument do you generally run when you're a novice debater, right? Or the kind of arguments that you are already perhaps familiarized with as a novice debater. Those are the practical arguments, right? Where you say that something should or should not happen because there are consequences of this thing happening. It could be good or bad depending on which you say that this should or should not happen, right? So there's an action, there's a consequence. The consequence has some sort of a value. It's either positive or negative. Depending on what type of a value it has, you say this action is appropriate or inappropriate uh, in a society, right? That's basically what practical arguments are like on to think of them or like to understand them on a surface level. But then to go deeper into what practical arguments constitute, you need to understand that like I said, right, you're always working towards an end goal when you're debating on a motion, and it's societal betterment. This could be in any possible dimension, right? This depends on the theme of the motion. So it could be making I mean, I don't know how many times I've repeated this, but then just so it's like internalized and understood, there are various themes like technology and popular culture and politics. So these are the dimensions. So the societal betterment, when I say societal betterment, I mean betterment in these different directions depending on which direction the motion targets, right? So when you run a practical argument, you're basically running a utilitarian cause, right? Where you're saying that something should or should not happen because there is some utility to it, right? Or there is no utility to it, right? So this is to say, all of us understand what utility is, right? Utility is just basically the purpose of something and the end goal it actually helps transpire. So if I do something, let's say imposition of carbon tax, carrying forward the same example that we were using the other day, if I say imposition of carbon tax should happen, a practical argument would be that yes, it should happen because it leads to individual sensitization, right? It doesn't come about through any other alternative. Because if you tell people to be environmentally sensitized towards like all the contamination, pollution of the environment that's happening through them, they don't care because it's a collective affair, right? So if global warming is happening, it's not my personal problem, so I wouldn't care about it. But if I have to pay a carbon tax every time I choose to pollute through some way or like through some means, then I'm definitely more cognizant of what I'm doing and likely to change my path and mend my ways. So carbon tax imposition is good because the practical outcome of that is that people become individually sensitized, which in turn leads to better action on behalf of the people, because now there is internal fear that we have instilled in them through carbon taxes. Got it? So your money is the incentive to push individual initiative, and that actually brings about majority benefit, benefit to majority, right? Where most of the people are better off because now the environment will fare better than it used to, and people are because people are more responsible. So on this particular argument, I'm running entirely on pragmatics, saying that if you do this, society is going to be better off. People at large, most of the people are going to be happy. There is net happiness on our side of the house, because of which we think this utility justifies the action that we are proposing from our side of the house. Got it? That's as I mean, that's all there is to practical arguments, basically. Other things, I mean, the nuances you understand when you start debating. but it's about tangible outcomes and material impacts in the society. That's something that you need to keep in mind. But on to the principal arguments, right, which might not be so easy to understand. Also, they're difficult to convey even when you understand them. This is to say that as opposed to practical arguments, principal arguments contest the idea of utility. Okay. So you might say that carbon tax imposition is a good thing because that way people will be scared of polluting because they don't want to pay a tax. They don't want their pockets to be lightened by some mistake of their own or folly of their own, which is okay. Practically, it sounds good. But then principally, the other side might have a problem with that, right? They might say that by imposing a carbon tax, the government does not realize how much pressure it's going to put on the poor people, right? Because poor people also pollute the environment given that they do not have alternatives, right? They don't know, they possibly don't know about the alternatives, or they don't have the money to buy these eco-friendly commodities in the market because they're also more expensive, right? So anything that is eco-friendly would also be a little more expensive than the other things. Have you noticed that? Because it's sustainable. So when you, even like big fast fashion brands like H&M and Zara, when they sell any product whatsoever, it's always going to be on the high end, the pricing, when it's sustainable fashion, right? When it's something that's eco-friendly, sustainable fashion made from recycled material or some such thing, which means that switching is also like an expensive choice. Switching to eco-friendly material is also an expensive choice. So, and so far as there is this kind of a discrepancy in the market where whatever is healthier, whatever is like more agreeable, to use is also more expensive. That's a problem, right? Because the poor people, first of all, they can't make the switch so easily because it's so expensive for them. But then on top of it, this inability of being able to keep up with the society is being punished over again by the government through the tax imposition. Do you understand? So this is a principal harm, which means that you're not, as a welfare government, as a democratic government, you're not keeping in mind your own responsibility of creating a level playing field in the market, right? Where poor people can also purchase eco-friendly material as conveniently as the rich people do. You're just saying that if they're going to continue polluting, then they have to pay a carbon tax, right? But the reality is that even if they don't pay a carbon tax, and even if they wanted to become environmentally conscious, they possibly cannot do it because they don't have enough money to expend on garments, right? They have other more important things to take care of, because of which they're fine with, like, I mean, everybody first meets their own immediate problems, right? If I'm going to die of starvation, let's say, I'm first going to feed myself rather than think about global warming, right? That's the situation with poor people as well. ये तो क्या class करी, पैसे लगे। Kyra needs to mute herself. Okay. The principal harm here is that abdication of duty by state government. Do you understand? So the state government does not realize its own duty of equalizing the level, the playing field in the market, and they are in fact punishing the poor through the carbon tax imposition. They're shifting the burden and they're shirking off their responsibility. Do you understand? So here, what are principles at the end of the day? Some widely, commonly cherished beliefs which all of us think of as important for the sustenance of society and peaceful, harmonious coexistence. So beliefs is just like, so, okay, don't think of beliefs as something that's culture specific or religion specific, right? Because whatever your religion believes in might be somebody else's fallacy, and might be somebody else might consider that uh, a perfidious activity, right? This is to say that there is no black and white when it comes to morality or justice or any other abstraction of that kind, right? What do you base your principles on then? A very common idea of what should happen in society according to, again, like I told you, right? Just remove those cultural barriers and national boundaries and think of yourself as humanity and what it is that humanity can cherish as a whole. Those are your principles, right? For example, I might be allowed to eat something as per my religion, but then that same thing might be banned for other people to for the people of some other religion, but then that's not something that can be a principal contention, right? Because it's what your religion tells you, but what to eat and what not to eat is not it's not an ethical concern for like all of us as humanity, right? It's always going to be culture specific. Some people agree to it, some people don't. But consider this, right to a life of dignity. I think that's something that can apply to everybody, right? It doesn't matter if you're like an Indian or American or from some other part of the world. It's always going to be applicable for you as long as you're a human being, human being, and you like coexist with other humans, right? You always have that right to a life of dignity. The thing here is that anything that you want to run as a principle then should have some universal application, right? Which means that just because it applies to 10 people or your family or your group of affiliate, like, or your or people you're affiliated to, it doesn't by default make that thing a principle, right? It's just your a personal belief. Don't equate it to a generic principle. A principle is what is universally applicable, what can mostly be applied to almost every situation, right? For example, if I trust you with something, you shouldn't breach that trust of mine. That's like a principle that I can run almost everywhere, because whoever is, if I hold you as a confidant, you shouldn't like breach that trust. And that's something that everybody is entitled to, right? So even if there is a perpetrator of crime and they have been put behind bars, you can't tell this person something and then not do it as a police official, not a police, but like some sort of an authority or an official. Because I mean, again, trust cannot be breached even with like the worst of actors in the society, which means that once you have given a promise, you have to fulfill it as long as you can, and there is no unforeseen trouble that keeps you from fulfilling it. Do you guys understand principles a little bit? Yeah. Give me
Yeah.
some confirmation, some emoji that just confirms that everybody's listening. I don't know. Most of you are not on camera, which is why I tell you to do this. I don't like it myself, but if you need me to stop doing this, calling for a thumbs up, just please be on camera. Cool. Um, so yeah, principal arguments are basically you assessing the value in a particular argument, right? Okay, this might happen, and this might even lead to practical outcomes. I mean, positive outcomes. But then, is it a good thing in the first place to happen, right? Because not the utility is not everything, and utility alone does not determine the validity of achieving something, right? The means of achieving a good end should also be good, is what like is like the common idea or adage that you can keep in mind when you're contemplating principles. So principles are run to contest practical arguments, but also to contest other principles, which means that you can say that, oh, people have a right to individuality, right? People have the right to make free choices, and have freedom of expression. All of that counts under individuality. But then somebody else might say that, look, people should also have a right. I mean, people there is also another principle of collective responsibility, right? If you live in a society, you should also give back to the society as far as you can, because this society nourishes you and cherishes you. You should return the favor. That's how a society can, I mean, this integrity is important so that people, I mean, again, for harmonious coexistence and whatnot. So these are two conflicting principles, because if I am pursuing individuality, it's likely that this individuality will come at the cost of me, of my community values, right? Sometimes I, as like a girl from a conservative family, might have to go against my parents and my conservative, whoever, like conservative relatives or whatever. This means that my individuality takes it over my community allegiance for a while, because I want to set things right. So this is a conflict between two principles. Now, whichever side wins this particular argument of what this girl should do, should they go ahead and actually create a ruckus in their community for individual pursuits or not, is actually going to be contingent on who proves the worth of their principle better, right? This is to say that no principle is intrinsically good or bad, or no principle is intrinsic is like self-evident, right? There is no principle this which is inviolable, that does not require an analysis. Because even if you think right to life of, let's say, even if you think privacy is an important principle, that everybody has the right to privacy and a protected life, you still need to prove to me why this principle, although it is in general it's appreciated and it's important for people, why does it hold any water in this debate? Understand? So like any principle that you run, it cannot be, I mean, what I don't want you to do is this, right? You, I mean, whatever is being taught here in the training and whatever principles I'm mentioning, you can't just go ahead and reiterate the same principles in your respective speeches and say that just because we've heard other people talk about these principles as like values to be cherished, we think they stand by themselves, right? Without any explanation. That never happens. I mean, we don't care who gave a principle and who tried instituting a principle in the past. As long as you don't have like an analysis for that principle, it's probably not going to stand in the debate. I'll give you an example. Now, nonviolence is a principle that was proliferated and popularized by Mahatma Gandhi, right? But you can't go into a debate and say that just because nonviolence was pursued by Gandhi, and Gandhi is such a personage today, even like from a national perspective for us as a country, it's because of that that the principle of non-violence should stand. Because you are not telling me why this principle of non-violence is going to work wonders over again, right? Which is to say that, let's say, even if you are able to prove that non-violence was a useful principle to pursue against the Britishers because we were few in number or whatever, why you still haven't proven to me the worth of it in the contemporary times, right? Why do you think non-violence is still going to be of use when maybe my characterization of the governments and the authorities is that they are extremely radical and offensive? So non-violence, pursuing non-violence might be like impossible against these people because of how radical they are. So the thing is that just claiming that somebody used a principle at some point in their life and it created a difference does not justify you using the same principle in some other context. You also have to tell me why this principle is going to work in your context, independent of the justification that that other person, the famous personality, gave for the principle that they ran. Do you guys understand? Okay. Can you just give me a show of hands and share some common principles that abound in the society, like some principles that you know of? Or perhaps can think, see, another thing about principles, Vedant, I'll take you in a second, is that principles aren't written somewhere, right? Your constitution definitely works on principles and ethics, and like legislations also come into being considering all dimensions of ethics and justice and whatnot. But it's never a document or an inventory of principles which you pick from, right? So this again is not about being learned. It's about thinking about a principle. What do people want in common, and making a principle out of it. So like articulating it. This could be uniquely yours. Maybe nobody has thought in the direction that you possibly are thinking or thinking in, right? This is to say that this can be a unique principle that you're running. So please don't look for precedents. Sometimes you can just contemplate a situation, find out what you think could be a principle, and try articulating it and give it your best shot. That works as well. Ryan, you're late. That's okay. I mean, that's okay. You don't have to apologize for that in the chat. Okay. Whoever had their hand raised, Vedant, your input, please.
Yeah, so one common principle we see in society could be the principle of humanity and how it defines whether like, how it holds true to almost all across the globe, and how it's like instead the amount of rules on how you must act to be considered human. Yeah.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I was unable to hear you because of some glitch
Okay.
on. Yeah, could you come again?
Yeah. Can you hear me better now? Okay, so one principle could be the principle of humanity, and yeah, so how it essentially binds humans together.
Okay, principle of humanity. I mean, if you look at, no, this is very vague. So refine it. So if you're going to say principle of humanity, what does that mean, right? If you're meaning empathy, now principle of humanity could mean a lot of things. That you should be empathetic towards your fellow citizens, that you should not deliberately harm them, that you shouldn't be manipulative, that you should be honest, that you shouldn't breach trust. So there's so many other principles. This is just like the broadest term that could be used to define principles, right? Because at the end of the day, it's for the welfare of humanity. So you have to give me more dimensions to what you think is going to bring about this cohesion. Okay. In the society. Cool. Ekamjot?
I think one such principle is the principle of respect. Whenever we see someone or we meet them, we should always treat them with respect and actually talk to them with in a really polite way. We should not be mean or rude or anything or be abrupt. We should respect them and actually talk to them like they're a person of themselves. So I think that is a pretty important principle that actually comes under the principle of humanity.
Principle of respect. Yeah, I mean, I understand. This is again an idea of dignity, right? As to
Yeah.
how everybody should have a life of dignity, life, a right to dignity, and for that to happen, everybody needs to respect each other's boundaries.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Rian.
I think
Yeah.
another principle would be respect and I'm kind of just adding on really, but so and my point has basically been covered. But yeah, I think an important principle to have is to respect people no matter what their background is. Like the mock motion we done an assignment on, and so respect,
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah, I get it. Okay, so I need to give you a clarification here because two people have said the same thing now. When you talk about respect, although this is something that is required in the society for everybody to be happy, this is not a principle because understand the line of thought here. You are saying that respect is required, but respect is not the end, it's the means to something, right? Whereas the principle has to be based on the end. What does this mean? Through respect, you choose to give everybody a life of dignity, like I said before, which means that the principle will have to be with the ultimate goal that you have in mind, which is a life of dignity. So you should say right to dignity rather than saying respect. I think that makes more sense because you're just saying that, oh, everybody should be respected. But then respect, first of all, is a very vague term, right? What does that mean? Dignity is vague as well, but then everybody understands that as long as I don't feel humiliated, as long as I feel like any other person, as long as I'm not discriminated against and made to think of as lower or lesser, I have a life of dignity. But then it's very difficult to say what respect should mean, and in from context to context not everybody can be respected, right? So there is no universal application if you're going to say this, that there has to be a right to respect, because some people are flagrant. Some people would abuse you and would not listen. There are always antisocial elements in the society, because of which just reciprocating not reciprocating can lead to them just being more abusive, right? If they take your kindness for weakness. So it's also something that is not universally applicable. Just keep that in mind, or perhaps not applicable across situations. Parisa, yes, I don't know why I've struggled with the name so much.
Arita. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because I have a friend who's called Parisha, and I get confused with that.
Again, a proper noun, anyway you want to call my name. You want to say my name?
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
I think the principle of stealing, like you shouldn't steal, that's something that's socialized into every person, no matter, irrespective of their culture, their country, their race. The principle of not stealing from people is something that's socialized into everyone, I think.
Yeah, okay, again, stealing is a means, right? You are saying that something should not happen, an act, a verb should not be performed so that an end might be attained. What is the end?
The end is people, their them having the
Safety, security.
safety, security, peace, and harmony.
That's your principle. That's
Yes,
your principle. Right to safety is a principle.
right.
And that doesn't just apply to stealing. That also applies to like women's protection, women stepping out late at night, and all those things.
That's a very broad spectrum, I think, and then that's why I did not want to say it. So that's why I narrowed it
No, no,
down.
no. So principles can be broad and generic, right? So right to safety is something that will apply in a lot of debates, right?
It will.
So, but then your nuances will change
But
depending
your
on
right to
what you are.
safety
Yeah,
is defined very different in a lot of cultures and a lot of constitutions. It's the right to safety is there, but the nuances, like you said, they keep changing with place to
but
place.
there's some basic understanding, right? Like physical safety, emotional safe, yeah, those kinds of things are pretty clear. Also because there's so much theory around that now.
Yes.
Araman, your input.
Ma'am, right to preach or profess any religion or culture of a choice.
That's a fundamental right that we have in our Indian constitution, right?
All right, all right.
But then no, I'm not saying you can't run it, but then the extent of that. Preaching shouldn't mean forcefully converting, this, that. So like that is why, like advisability,
Okay, ma'am.
think of principles which are uniquely your own, right? Because this is very, very context heavy. This is for India, where there's a lot of religions, they clash, there's communalism. This might not be so relevant, or this might not find an articulation in almost everybody's constitution because of how their because of how their countries are configured in terms of demographics. Devasha?
Yes, the base of justice, the base of giving people what they deserve, with the final aim being treating humans like humans. Yes, that is my
Again, very, very generic. So think more like justice is fine, but justice has so many dimensions, like so many. So think about what that means, right? What does justice mean to you as a child, to a woman, to a man, to an old person? Think of it like that. so as to come up with like better flavors of what justice might mean and like better.
All right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Arnav?
One right to agency, so one should have control over like over the actions of their life, and they should be free to do as they please, so long as it does not harm those around them.
Yeah, perfect. Yes. Right to agency, right or not, is a principle which can be used in a lot of situations, but mostly used in feminism debates. At least, like I do it, use it there, but then that just might be a bias as well. You can use right to agency in a lot of places, simply where people just don't have access to making the idea of making free choices, and that happens quite a lot, right? Not just feminism, also happens when capitalism is there, right? So capitalism, just to say, it is just or like when peer pressure is there. So when I am in my teen years, I'm likely to be influenced a lot by what my peers say, not so much by my family. So I make decisions under pressure. That's also loss of right to agency. But what loss of right to agency can look like is also capitalistic societies pushing me to do something which I wouldn't otherwise have wanted to do had it not been for the fancy marketing and advertisements. For example, buying iPhones, right? And the kind of social discourse that it generates. So I might not want an iPhone 14, but I'd definitely buy it if I see everybody around me buying it. Cool. So that is also a way of, like, there is like this invisible influence on me, which means my agency, it seems like I have agency when I go to an Apple store and tell them to give me an iPhone, but you actually don't, because it's the capitalist invisible hand working its way into like conditioning you a certain way. Aradhana?
Right to equality, because equality should be given to everyone, no matter their race, their gender, their nationality, and etc. And it's important for them, I mean, to get their equal rights. Yeah, one cannot and one can. So yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, right to equality, definitely, it's the most fundamental principle that you could use almost everywhere. But right to equality, using it that in parliamentary debates will be very, very general again. So although you do understand now what principles are, people, it's just important that you find more nuances. Like talking about agency in particular is something where you're targeting a specific action that you want in your life because it enriches your life. So that's a good example of a nuance, right? That's how. So now right to agency is one thing, but then right to bodily autonomy even. Yeah. So bodily autonomy means that whatever I choose to do with my body is my decision. Nobody else should interfere. Which means if I choose to get a tattoo, I shouldn't be punished for it. If like all that debate around abortion rights and all of that is also on the basis of like right to bodily autonomy and women should have access to it. But also that women shouldn't be told what to wear, when to wear it, and how to keep themselves, right? Because, or how to maintain themselves, even men for that matter, anybody in the society, right? You're told to be a certain way, you're told to look a certain way, not look unkempt, always be presentable. But then what I choose to do with myself should be my own personal calling. Cool. Arnav, I'll take you in a second. I just need to like get the door. There's nobody at my place.
Yeah.
Yeah, Arnav.
Yeah, it's more of a question in a way. So would running a principle of reparations work?
Yeah, it would. Yeah. In fact, this is the most widely run principle. So right to, I mean, there is a reparatory duty that you can say is outstanding on somebody's part, right? Which is to say that like, look, colonialism took away a lot from the developing world, which is why we think the developed countries today owe us this, to like give us reparations in so like in any like possible way. They should just give us some reparation, right? For example, Shashi Tharoor said that, oh, it should be an apology, or it could also be like giving back all the wealth that they took away from us, or just like providing financial aid to countries which really require that, because the condition they are put in is because of the colonization that happened years ago and the effects are still felt. So all of that could use reparation as a principle to justify, right? How this like materializes in debates is like this. So it's definitely between country versus country, right? Where you say that the oppressor should atone for its wrongdoings through reparations. by giving to the oppressed, right? But then another way of looking at reparations is in climate change debates, environment debates. I just see a lot of people running this where they say, again, it's a rich poor divide. I mean, any kind of hierarchy that exists in the society, you can say that the haves and should give to the have nots, the oppressor should give to the oppressed, and not even as like a means of vengeance, right? You don't mean to say that we're vindictive just because you stole from us, now we want that money back. It's not even that, right? It's more about justice. It's more about us needing that kind of like a help and cushion because we didn't have it initially, and we have suffered for too long, and that it should be, I mean, you should call it quits for once, right? Because in theory everybody is democratic and whatnot now. So that's how right to reparations could be run possibly, and it is run quite a lot. So that's right. Anybody else? Any ideas on what principles I mean, any principles that you can think of right off the bat? Okay, another clarification. When you say right to equality, I think somebody mentioned it. Now, right to equality is important, but when I said nuances, I meant this, right? If you're talking about, let's say, there is a motion on education, and you have to debate between choosing private and public schools, right? Should we do away with private schools? Should there only be public schools, or is it public mixed? This mixed configuration of within the educational realm is fine. If those are the kinds of questions that you're raising in the motion, then it's mostly about right to equal access, I mean, equal access to opportunities, right? That kind of a right. So right to equality needs to be adapted to the motion, and then it will definitely come up with its own nuances. So when I think of equality from like an educational perspective, I say you should have access to resources. That's what equality should mean, really, right? Okay, I think that's pretty much it. We can perhaps practice. I don't want to discuss types of motions today because we have ample time to do that later, and this is more important. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to pick a motion, and we're going to come up with arguments on that motion and see if we come up with practical or principal arguments. And yeah, everybody can just weigh in on what they think can be the possible arguments from a particular side. Now let me go look for a good motion. I'll put in the chat and give you 2 minutes to think on it. Meanwhile, any questions are appreciated. Also, nobody is on camera, which
Do
is
we
just
have
like
to,
such a sad state of affairs. Yes,
or
Arun.
should we like prepare particular speeches for the same, like 1 minute or 2 minute, or just like straight off the bat start?
No. We'll just we'll have a random conversation about, not a random conversation, but like a very candid discussion on how you should.
With rebuttals and POIs.
No. Just like you'll know when we start.
All right.
It's just
Also,
people. Yeah.
for my assignment, I asked you this as well, but I did not send out a fleshed out speech. I just sent in arguments that I had from this side, and I did the characterization. And
Yeah, I think I did go through your assignment. I've been through most of your assignments. They were all good. As long as you attempted it, it's good.
my team as well. The problem hasn't been sorted out yet.
Yeah, that's a discussion. Cool. I'll just check with the team again. I did. I told them. They said it was going to be out today. So yeah, I'll get back to you on that. Thanks for
Also,
reminding.
I hope that you've received my assignment. I was kind of late in submitting it. I submitted it around 7. I had some internet issues then as well.
I don't remember checking yours, so I'd probably go back and check and let you know.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I mailed it at that email we were supposed to, but it wasn't a Google Docs because I was not able to access that. I just wrote my entire speech on Word and I attached it with that email. So I
Yeah,
hope that's fine.
that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, I'm putting a motion in the chat. I'll give you exactly 5 minutes, all of you, to think about it. Please don't be too impulsive and think about what this motion needs you to do and then give me inputs, right? I'm putting it in the chat. Okay, if you have any problems with the motion, you can unmute and ask. Otherwise, just take 5 minutes and we will reconvene at around 6:48, which is such a weird time here. But
We have to think about it from the proposition or opposition.
yeah, proposition. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. All of us are thinking as proposition right now. All of us. Don't particularly look for principal or practical arguments, just in general come up with arguments. We'll see how we can categorize them. Whoever is ready can give me a show of hands and we'll begin with them.
I just wanted to ask about the motion that we've been given. Are we just supposed to come up with the like argument, or are we supposed to write like a kind of speech?
No, you're just supposed to come up with an argument, but if to prove the worth of that argument, you need some framing, then you can introduce like a line or two of framing, but that you can verbally speak. You don't have to write anything right now.
Okay, all right.
Also, some of you should be ready with inputs by now. So please let's start the discussion because we have only 10 minutes, roughly speaking. Okay, we have 4 participants raising their hands. Parasa?
Okay, so basically, when I think of art, separating the art from the artist, the only question that comes up to me is that when we talk about this, do we, when we talk about art, we obviously think of it as something that's an extension of the artist, right? Because when you're creating something, you create it from what you believe, from your personal experiences. So it's a reflection of you, an amalgamation of everything that you believe. So I don't think that we can separate the art from the artist ever.
Okay, that's framing, right? That's
Right.
you framing, right? You're telling me you're just trying to push the idea that art and artist cannot be separate.
Yeah.
But if you were like if I was the other side, I'd just give you a simple example. Charles Dickens writes very empathetically about the working conditions of people in the factory and industries in the Victorian era. At
Right.
the same time, he's infamous for how he treated his wife. So on the like if you consider gender, he's a problematic person there. But if you consider labor rights and all of that those things, he's very empathetic, which means that he's two different people in his personal and professional life. He's able to bring out the worst in society and get people to become better through his writings, but then he himself is problematic in the personal life. So how do you think these two things can be entwined or intertwined?
Even Pablo Picasso, his paintings displayed misogyny and outright sex themes.
No, but then you are substantiating what Parisha is saying, right? She's saying that the art and artists are inseparable. The art and the artist are inseparable. I am saying that they might not be, just to like give you food for thought, not that you're wrong in what you're saying.
All right.
Right. See, like, but again, this is where I had a question. Like, the only question that I come up with that when I was about to ask you, not to ask you, but that's the question I had with myself as well, is that Van Gogh, his art doesn't necessarily portray some of the horrible things that he's done. But at the end of the day, Van Gogh as a person wasn't the best, and yet his art is probably the artwork that's seen all around the world.
Yeah, right. Okay, here's the thing, right? There's always going to be two. This debate is fundamentally about that. Government is going to say that look, art and artist are inseparable. Opposition will say you can definitely separate them, right? It's like going to any other profession. If
That's
I
the
am a data
main
analyst,
principle we're debating on.
yeah, what this depends on is solid framing and good analysis. That's all that I was trying to get at. So you have to anticipate what the opposition might say and you have to prove your point better in framing. Get it?
Right.
Yeah. Ekam Jyot?
I think art is really personal. It is like looking into the artist's soul, and like the artist, they spend so much time on just even a small piece of art, and separating them would be completely wrong. These artists, they make creations and they put in their efforts, their emotions, their supplies, and they just put their heart and soul into that one little thing that they do. And we can never really separate the art from the artist. That's because everything they make will have a piece of them in it. It might not be from their dominant personality, like everybody's talking about right now. It might not show if they were like a good person, if they were bad. It'll just show a piece of themselves, something that they will portray into their artwork. It shows
Okay,
their emotional value and their personality. So what I'm
I'm going
really
to
trying to say is, like, a person can be different at the end of the day, but the art piece will still have some part of the painter, of the artist in them, and you can never separate that.
cool. Okay, this is an argument, fine. But I think there is still, I mean, nobody understands the motion unnecessarily and what it calls from you just yet, right? Because I understand what you're
Can I
saying.
just give it a go?
Um, who was that? I think, I mean, there's a lot of people. Okay, let's just have all of your inputs and then I'll talk about it. Cool. Ekam Jyot and Parisa can like lower their hands because they responded. Arman,
So
Rian,
I
Arnav.
like an
That's the order.
extension to Ekamjot's and Parisa's speech. I think art can never be separated because Chris Brown is an artist, right? And he has a documented history of violence towards women. But it's impossible to separate the art from the artist because even when we listen his music, it supports his career and ability to create more content. And when we listen to his music, it immediately becomes a mode of income for him
Yeah,
as
good.
well.
Yeah, this is, you can make a principle out of it as well. I mean, okay, he makes some money, he's a perpetrator and he makes some money. What's the problem with that? I didn't really get the problem here. So I understand where you're coming from intuitively, but in terms of analysis, that link is missing.
All right, I'll work on that.
So the reason possibly would be this, right? That you don't want to positively reward a person who has been bad in their like character, right? And comportment. You want them to get better, and you have to, as a society, develop a deterrent for them, right? Whenever they do something wrong, they need to be punished for it. Which is why, like, this entire idea
Basically,
of
my point is that they should earn according to the artwork that they create and not the person that they are being judged by the society.
okay, okay, that's unrelated to what you said initially. So just like consolidate
That
your
could be an extension of like the income
no, no,
thing.
no. Pick one argument and try to extend it. Try to flesh that out. Don't go in different directions because then you lose track of what you are about to say fundamentally. I'll come back to you, right? Rian?
So, ma'am, my first thing was that separating the art from an artist and displaying solo art or talking about an art without the artist means the artist is not being referred to enough and their recognition is far lower. So that's one thing. And they would want their art and themselves to be credited together because that's why they made it. They wanted to be recognized for their art and therefore having their name on or being present in some form alongside their art is useful because that's the goal that they
Okay,
design the art
missing
with.
clarity. Missing. Okay, my problem with your understanding is missing clarity right now, right? You're saying artists need to be given their due. If you don't associate their name with the art, then they're probably going to be not known for what they did. The problem is, why is the artist's recognition so important? Now, intuitively, again, I understand where you come from. If I do something, I should be rewarded for it. But why? And why do you think the artists will always be good actors who need reward, who like need to be positively reinforced? Those are two questions that you will have to answer for this argument to stand. Got it? Rian, does that make
Yes,
sense?
ma'am. Yes, I got it. But okay, cool. Yeah.
Okay, Arna?
Okay, so yeah, the art is based off the experiences of the artist, the viewpoint of the artist, and the personality of the artist. So instead of this trope wherein the art and the artist are separated in society, it's important to hold the artist in regard to the quality of their art they make, and likewise to hold the art of the artist in regard to what the artist does. Because when you are separating the artist from the art, it allows for them to profit extravagantly from their work while simultaneously abusing the influence they have over society. There's a principle here: with power comes responsibility, and by choosing a manner of representing themselves which has such sway over society, such as art, which influences the masses, an artist receives a platform with which to impact society. Sometimes what is necessary is for society to use the art of the artist as a means of punishing the artist as and when they do not responsibly utilize their position of power. For example, boycotts.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense, because again, I think this point has already been made about how they benefit immensely, and that's wrong, because then you don't take any punitive action against problematic actors. But well analyzed, like better analyzed than the point that was initially made. I'm going to give my final inputs on whatever you guys are saying and whatever the mixing links are later. Ria, I'll hear you out on what you have to say.
Okay, so the work of art created by any artist has the right to be claimed by the artists themselves. They deserve recognition for their pieces of art, and the people buying this artwork should also be very well aware and cognizant of the history that's gone behind them buying this artwork. And this is because we're not merely taking a simple material of an artwork, but instead we're taking a piece of the artist's imagination, which is unique and varies from person to person, and thus should be recognized in its best possible form.
Okay, all right. So you guys can lower your hands if you have nothing more to say and you've been given a chance before. I think that's all of us. Arnav, is there something else that you need to say?
No, I forgot to lower my hand.
That's okay. Okay. Now, the thing here is that although we're going in the right direction, where we're all of us saying, I mean, not the right direction as such, we're just all of us being a little assertive collectively here, right? Because what all of us are trying to say is that art is like a reflection of the artist, and the artist cannot possibly keep their own identity aside while they're coming up with this art form, right? My only problem with this understanding of yours is that I don't have an analysis of why it cannot be that way, right? As to why I, as an artist, can cease to be any person at all, and why can't I make make art from an unbiased perspective? Maybe I can do that, right? I can meditatively think about only what I'm doing and try to be as unbiased as I could be. Now, if you want to prove that, look, art and artists are inseparable, that art will always reflect artist and their identity, then you need to give me some mechanism for that, right? That, look, an artist is a person. It's not possible for them to, like an automaton, just like let go of all the sentience and the emotionality that is generally always perpetually associated to us in every moment that we experience something, which is why we think that when you're making art, it invokes those emotions even more, right? And you already come from, or you could say that you come always from like a cultural background, right? You've always seen a certain type of people, and you've always been in certain settings, because of which these are internalized by you. This is to say that I might be a woman, I have lived in a patriarchal society for the longest time. It's unlikely that I am going to have anything to do with feminism, right? Because maybe I haven't, I mean, if I haven't heard of it, right? I don't know what women's equality is like, and it's going to reflect in all of my art forms, because that's a part of me. That's my identity, which I cannot put aside, because it's a subliminal conscious. It's my subliminal. It's in my subconscious, right? I'm unlikely to let go of that part of me, right? I'm unlikely to. So let's say I am a woman who has internalized patriarchy. I'm unlikely to go ahead and portray in my art a bold and audacious woman, because that kind of a trope simply doesn't exist in patriarchal societies. Women are always meek, and that is why my art will always be circumscribed to meek women. Got it? Because it's internalized in me. Now, this might not be the best example, but this is the simplest example I can possibly give you of how to explain a certain assertion. Do you guys understand how it was an assertion and how it can be proven better? Thumbs up? Yeah, okay. So even when you're saying, I mean, I think that's the only problem that I have with all of your characterization. And this wasn't essentially about framing, but then good that we did this, because if you're going to frame and say something, it might as well have like a reasoning, right? You just simply going ahead and telling me that, look, art is inseparable from the artist because it reflects this, that, and some words. But then I don't know why you're saying it, or why the opposite might not be true, right? You just find it easier to claim this right now because you don't have an opposition against you, and we are just collectively brainstorming from the same side. But it will be problematic for you to shore up your case later if you were in a debate and gave the same characterization. So just whatever you're saying, just let go of the assertions and analyze everything, right? Just like tell me why you think something happens. I don't know how to like frame this differently for you to understand this better. So this only comes from practice, but understand that everything requires explanation. Again, like the point about recognition, I know where you come from. People like recognition, right? People work for recognition, people like social appropriation. But the problem is that I, as an adjudicator, will not fill it up for you, right? I will not fill in the blanks. So you have to tell me how recognition makes you better. Perhaps you can say that, panel, once my safety, my security, physiological, other needs are fulfilled, I work towards a goal, right? And it's a journey. It's a long journey where there are also failures. So some positive reinforcement helps me persevere, which is why we think validation is extremely important for any living being, right? As long as they're doing something and as long as they're just adding value to the society. Now, by saying this, I'm able to say that, look, because people are able to persevere better, because they will continue doing the good thing if you appreciate it if you appreciate them for it, then it's legitimate for me to ask for validation. In the absence of this explanation, it's not okay for me to say that, oh, everybody should have recognition. I mean, why should they? Does that make sense? I mean, this might sound very obvious to you guys, but then you have to analyze it like that. Convinced? If you're not convinced, you can just unmute and counter question. I'm happy with that as well.
During this, can we also give like examples from the past, like Frida Kahlo or Nina Simone?
Oh yeah, about examples. Now, when you give examples, the problem is that you can't start with an example. So definitely examples enrich your case, but use examples to think about framing, right? Because when you have an example to like have your framing revolve around, then you are also like more sure-footed about what your understanding and characterization of things are. This is to say that everybody is saying that the artist and art are inseparable, but nobody is considering what is the situation, what is the status quo like, right? What is the problem that this motion is possibly fixated on? Maybe this is a problem of, so if I contextualize it in J.K. Rowling's terms, right? So like they have this roaring franchise, and like they have this series of like the Harry Potter series, which is doing so well and everybody loves it. But then afterwards, after it has been popularized, after everybody loves Harry Potter and can't get enough of it, now we know that J.K. Rowling had some homophobic comment to make on Twitter or whatever. I'm not like fully aware of what the controversy was, but I know there was a contention.
It was
Now,
a transphobic comment that J.K. Rowling made on Twitter, and then it
yeah, there was like an entire fury around it.
Yeah.
So the point is that J.K. Rowling has already popularized herself through her work, and this problem that has appeared has only occurred afterward, right? So the thing here is that when you're talking about situations, you also have to keep in mind what the status quo is like, right? What the situation could possibly be like. So that framing is missing as well, of just having an understanding of what this can look like, or what are the problems that can possibly be created of a certain thing, right? So if you're saying that, look, the artist should be punished, then maybe, I mean, artists, there is no such thing as objectively good or being objectively good or objectively bad, right? For example, you also have to consider minority artists who get blamed for the slightest things, right? Let's say an artist makes a painting. Okay, another good example here would be of let's say a Muslim artist, where Muslims are in minority. If there is a Muslim artist in a country where they are in minority and they end up making a certain art which portrays something, but then that's misinterpreted by the majority communities when they consume that art, and they say that, oh, this Muslim artist, because this art is an extension of their identity, we think they're trying to be seditious here, and they can be implicated with treason or like other things like being anti-Hindu or anti any other anti whatever, like whatever Islamophobia plays out, it might play out over again, right? Through the art, because you're considering it an extension of the artist now. So this is another problem that can transpire. But to contemplate these problems, you need to have a certain understanding of like what the status quo is like. You need to know that status quo is communal, that there are groups, that there is majority groups, there's minority groups, there's minority artists, and minority artists can be discriminated against. Or if you don't think of those things, your case will be very, very basic and generic, which was the case today. So I think day after tomorrow, we can again start with another case prep session. This just induces better clarity than theory sessions do. So to break the monotony, let's do that. The assignment again, like the last time, I'll put it out by tomorrow morning or late evening today, and you can attempt it tomorrow between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. If there are any questions, you can stay back. If they're not, thank you so much for joining in. I'll see you on Saturday now.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.